do some sharing. Copy. Da, da, da. There we go. Hello, 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 hello. I'm quintessential Miss Martin this morning. Disney dress on. It's summer, so, well, she says, this is what I'm hoping it's going to be like this the whole time in Qatar. I can already tell my hair's going to annoy me. One sec. Oh, I've got shorts on, so you're all good. I'm decent. Morning, guys. Morning, morning, morning for our penultimate lesson before half term. Shove that back. That looks better. It looks wet. It's because it's got loads of product in it. Like that, Lachlan. Like it. Indeed, indeed. But I do have my Jungle Book dress on. We're good to go. I'm going to loosen that slightly. Hi, Sam. I knew what you meant, Lachlan. You're good, you're good. Thank you for your work. I was just about to think back, but I also had a mouthful of porridge. So, right. I'm just going to kind of go over what the plan of action is today. You're not late. You're not late. You're all good. You're all good. Right, what the plan of action is kind of for today, we're going to look at the Hungarian Uprising, obviously, and then on Friday we'll be looking at the consequences. That will come up on Teams tomorrow. I've tried to set everything 24 hours in advance, apart from yesterday, which was just a nightmare to do anything on Teams and show my homework. I don't know whether it was my internet, I don't know whether it was the program itself, but yesterday was no fun. And then my memory stick, my hard drive died. So it was just like, yes, what a day. Loving life. Now, what's really quite good about the Hungarian Uprising is it is going to lend itself really nicely to, I love how it's telling me that I'm live on YouTube. Thank you very much. So the Hungarian Uprising it lends itself lovely to one of our questions. So after half term, because I will not be setting you any work next week at all because it is half term, you deserve a break. I will be going over how to tackle one of our questions, and it's going to be tough, I won't lie, because it's a question you've never seen before, a style you've never done before, but the minute you get the hang of it, it'll be absolutely fine, I promise you. But in order to actually get that done, we do need to have the content, and you'll understand why. Okay. Oh, did you? Potsdam was, I'm doing it slightly different with the other group. They need it in slightly smaller chunks. Wait, it's half term next week. Yeah, it's half term next week. So Friday's your last day of virtual school. Then you've got a week off. And then you come back on 1st of June. Is that a Monday? Yeah, the 1st of June will be your next lot of virtual lessons after this week. Right then, let's get on with the Hungarian Uprising. I'm not very convinced about this whiteboard, I must say. Not convinced at all. But hey ho. Right, now the Hungarian Uprising actually happened in 1956. Da-da-da. But in order to start the story of the Hungarian Uprising, we do actually have to start in 1953 on the saddest day, the worst day of the course, in my personal opinion, which is the 5th of March, 1953. And the reason it's the worst day is because Stalin dies. He has a massive brain hemorrhage or stroke. And because he is killed off all of his doctors and made them all really scared of him. They are absolutely terrified to treat him, and they just kind of leave him, and he ends up dying this really slow, painful death. And no, I know. So he dies this really slow, painful death, and the people of Russia are absolutely devastated. Now, I am talking like something like 15, 20 years ago, not even that long ago, I don't think. They had a poll saying if you could have anyone replace Vladimir Putin from Russian history, who would you select and why? And the Russian people chose Stalin. They still love him. They still have this connection with him. So the people of Russia were absolutely devastated. I think secretly the West were a bit like, yes. Obviously I wasn't alive, but sometimes. And it actually takes 2 years for the Soviet Union to get themselves into a new routine and get a leader. Now, to be a leader in the Soviet Union is quite a difficult process. So there's a lot of infighting. It's a lot of working your way up the ranks, getting support. They have a couple of temporary leaders that I am not even going to tell you about because we don't need to know them. Honestly, there, the deputy leader takes over. He's called Georgy Malenkov. You don't need to know that. I don't even know his name. I can tell you now, as someone that marked this question last year, you don't need to know that. So it is 1955 then when they get their new leader, and they get a guy called Nikita Khrushchev. I'm so glad I wore shorts. Okay, now Khrushchev has 3 H's in it, so it's KHRUSHCHEV. He has 3 H's in it, so he's Triple H. If you've ever watched WWE, it was WWF initially. And the way to remember him, so you've got Stalin with the big moustache, the grandfather moustache, and then Khrushchev is how I remember him because he's got a bald head. That will come into play later. So we've got the Hungarian, 1955, Nikita Khrushchev takes over the Soviet leadership and becomes the ruler of Russia. Now, he establishes himself as someone that's very different to Stalin. He wants to make that a point. He wants to make sure that he is not seen as another Stalin. He wants to be very different. So he makes this secret speech. So this secret speech is made to the Communist Party. Like I said, it's so secret that we know about it. And he refers to a new way of thinking, a new policy, a new direction for the USSR. And that is a process of what we call de-Stalinization. That effectively means what it kind of says on the tin: removing and relaxing the policies that Stalin put in place and trying to relax that hostility every lesson. Did you want to come and learn about the Cold War? Did you? Can I please ask that you stand over there? Please? Good boy. You're going to lay on the book. There we go. We'll give it a go. We'll carry on. I don't need the book anyway. I've just got it there. Lovely dog. I know. Every lesson, he likes to learn about the Cold War. Yes, we've got this de-Stalinization process, and he wants to. Everyone's saying hello to you, Fletch. I'm afraid he doesn't care, which is really naughty. Come on, say hello quickly. Say, hello. I'm going to sit over there now and be a good boy. There we go. It won't be long before Bonnie. How does it feel to be upstaged by a dog? To be fair, it's a regular occurrence in this household. Bonnie and Fletcher rule rule my house. So I'm used to it. I'm okay with it. I had issues with it, but now it's been 9 years. I think I'm okay. But thanks for asking. So we've got de-Stalinisation, that like more peaceful, getting relaxing Stalin's policies and not being so brutal towards the satellite states. You've lost my train of thought, buddy. Okay, here we go. So we've looked at the USSR and what's going on there. We do actually have to have a little look at Hungary before it starts, obviously, rising up to kind of get it to this matching point. Now, really annoyingly with this particular event in the Cold War, you have sort of two parallel train tracks that then actually have something that switches and makes them cross paths. All right, so the story runs side by side until something switches and they end up crossing paths. In Hungary, we have a leader called Rákosi. Now, this guy was a total fanboy of Joseph Stalin. He really liked his policies. He wanted to run Hungary in the exact same way that Stalin was running Russia. So he liked that brutal treatment of his of the people, so the Russian people, the Hungarian people. He felt that he could rule with fear rather than popularity. And he similarly tried to create this cult of personality, this absolute love of him as a leader, even though he was really brutal and horrible to his people. Well, the Russian people, if you remember, had Stalin since the 20s, and now it was coming into the 50s. They'd had 30 years of his rule. They knew what he was about. They'd grown to love him. Why? I don't know, but then again, I am a fangirl. Yeah. And Rákosi could not replicate this from the end of the Second World War. As much as he tried, his brutal treatment caused of the Hungarian people caused mass unpopularity and actually made him really difficult to work with. Totally Stockholm syndrome, definitely. And he, where am I? You really don't need to know all that. That's just too wordy. Yeah, we don't need that. Rákosi actually killed about 2,000 people in purges. He imprisoned 200,000 political prisoners. He was not a nice guy. And when Khrushchev comes into power in 1955, the people of Hungary have had enough. They've had enough. They don't like Rákosi. He is really unpopular. They're not having him anymore. And they end up having a protest in Budapest, which is the capital city, if you didn't know. Now, I don't know if you've seen when we were involved in the war with Iraq. You guys would have been very young then. But when Britain was involved in the war in Iraq, they helped the Iraqi people pull down the statues of Saddam Hussein. And it was this big moment. There's quite a lot of images, if you fancy researching it, of these people literally putting ropes on these statues and pulling them down together and being a real big symbol of the end of that rule. Well, they did that with Stalin in Hungary. There's the one yawn. At least we got 14 minutes into the live stream before my yawn. And so they were pulling down Stalin symbols, statues, and Rákosi was then replaced by a much more pleasant guy, someone that was a bit more lenient, that had the same way of thinking as Khrushchev, a guy called Imre Nagy. Okay, Imre Nagy. Now you'll see he's called, it looks like Nagy. You can call him Nagy as well. I just call him Naj because I went in. This is quite an embarrassing story. When I was going to mark the summer paper last year, I went in and had to mark the Hungarian Uprising and say, oh yeah, well, Nagy. And they were like, the teacher said, that's not how you say it, it's Naj. So there we go. So Imre Nagy takes over, and he is much more popular. The people like him. He's seen as a real breath of fresh air. You okay there, Fletcher? Am I going okay? It's all right? Okay, good. Right then. So these really are the causes then of the Hungarian uprising so far. We've just got one little bit left to do, and then I'll move on to the event itself. Oh, these pens are much nicer than the ones. Might get some pink stuff to this with the half tones. So I can brighten it up. There we go. So when Imre Nagy comes into power, he calms down the protests, and he then states that he has a few demands for the Russian leader in order to kind of say, like, this is how I want to change the country. Hope you're okay with it. So he talks with them and he says, right, you can withdraw your tanks now. We're all good. And Khrushchev's like, okay, yeah, we'll talk. We'll take our tanks out. Perfect, thanks. So Nash says, right, well, I do have a few things that I would like, if that's all right. And he asks for some basic freedoms. So bearing in mind, they haven't had freedom of the press, freedom of worship, freedom of speech, free elections since the Nazis have walked in. Remember, the Soviet Union have come in and given their own version of free elections, which are not really free elections. And then it's state-controlled. Stop licking your feet. Sorry. They've had a Soviet-controlled press, Soviet-controlled worship, so you could only do like Russian Orthodox practice. So Nagy asks for these freedoms. He also asks for trade links with the West. So you can imagine now we're going on to quite rocky ground here. He wants there to be more neutrality for Hungary. Here is the one that kicks it all off. He asks to leave the Warsaw Pact. Remember, in the Warsaw Pact is like the Russian version of NATO, and there is no choice in it. It is a forced thing. They have been made to join the Warsaw Pact. There is no choice in it. They have to go in and defend each other, whether they like it or not. So Nash says, well, I'd quite like to leave, actually, if that's okay. And that really winds Khrushchev up. Big style. He cannot let that happen at all. That cannot happen, because if Hungary are allowed to leave, then all the other countries in the Warsaw Pact will be allowed to leave, which will mean that the Soviet Union then go unprotected, which means if they start a war, they start a war with any other country, they no longer have backup. And that could then mean this complete collapse of the Soviet Empire. That can't happen at all. Are you going? And that was the end of Fletcher. Not like end. So Khrushchev has to act. He has to act here. And this is where things start kicking off good and proper. Our first real, I would say, our real meaty confrontation in the Cold War. So let me just get my date correct. Yep. think it is. Yeah. Oh. There we go. Sorry about that. So on the 4th of November, Khrushchev takes the decision that actually can't let Hungary leave. They're not backing down on this whole Warsaw Pact thing. He's got to go in and he's got to show that actually, when he's talking about de-Stalinisation, there is a limit on it. Yes, he wants to get rid of the Stalin's policies. Yes, he wants to peacefully coexist, but on his terms. So on the 4th of November, 6,000 Soviet tanks and 200,000 Soviet troops go into Hungary and invade. And they go in with lots of force. Hello! They're going to with lots of force, and they are prepared to take Hungary back by force. Okay. Now, the Soviet army quickly captured airports. They captured key roads, junctions. But to be fair to the Hungarians, they do put up a fight. And they do this by using unconventional war tactics or guerrilla tactics, okay? Now, there was bit of fighting, and the rebels were no match for the Russian troops. They did try to use like Molotov cocktails, and they tried to steal weaponry. There was as much as, you know, they could really. And they were able to communicate with the West. It's like throwing a rock at the wall. It's not going to do much but chip it. Yeah, exactly. They throw Molotov cocktails at the Soviet troops, and it's just a bit like it was a dent in their armor, but it was definitely not a critical fault. Definitely Lokrin. Now, the West were able, or the Hungarians were able to communicate with the West by radio. They would plead for help. It was, if you get the chance to or want to listen to them, they are on YouTube. They are begging the West for help. They are asking for support, military support, any intervention, anything. But the West do nothing. And there is a ceasefire declared on the 10th, 6 days later, but the fighting lasts until 1957. And it is only then, when the sporadic fighting is done and all of the rebels are captured or killed, or even if they escape to different countries, that things then end. Now, consequences of this uprising are, I'm not going to go into too much detail because that is the lesson on Friday. But just so you know, one of the main things that you could even put in the event is Imre Nagy. Now, Nagy is captured by the Soviets, and he is told that he is going to be redeployed to, I believe it's Romania. Now, Nagy is hiding in the Yugoslavian embassy. Remember, Yugoslavia is not part of... Did Miss say activate Gulag? I didn't, but I can do. So Nagy is hiding in the Yugoslavian embassy, because remember, Yugoslavia wasn't part of the Soviet Union. But the Soviets storm there and get him. They replace Nagy with a guy called Kadar, who is much more hardline. Okay. Oh, you just about see that. Yeah, a guy called Kadar. And Nagy is arrested and told that he is going to be like moved or redeployed to Romania, where he is not going to have as much influence, as it were. That is a complete lie. Kadar has him arrested and then taken to Romania, and he is actually hanged in 1958 for treason. And Soviet troops then were very easily able to defeat the rebels, the Hungarian Uprising. They are quite easy, have a easy like squashing of it. They do lose, however, 7,000 troops. 7,000 troops are killed, but the rebels do lose 20,000, and 200,000 Hungarians become refugees, and they flee the country in order to try and get away from it. It does have an effect on the relationship between the East and the West, in that the West condemn the actions of the Soviet Union. However, they don't actually do anything. But like I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the consequences, just for the simple fact that I will do a proper lesson on it. And I say a proper lesson, it'll be a little bit shorter than 26 minutes on the consequences. Now, what I'd like you to do is there is a gap fill for, yeah, it is quite similar. I know that Star Wars has a lot of influence from the Cold War. I met someone at uni who had done their dissertation on Star Wars and Star Trek, and how the influences of the Cold War impacted film and industry, particularly Star Wars. So, the rebels in Star Wars are meant to be the West, and the Empire is meant to be Russia. There's a bit of random trivia for you. Yeah, so a gap fill for me if you can on the Word document or PDF, whatever you are using. And then I've set a 23-minute video of it's actually very good, I must say, of the Hungarian Uprising. It's not by me. And yeah, it just tells you the story, and just to kind of fill out those 4 boxes. If there's anything you need, I do have a lesson at 12 with year 10. I thought I would do yours earlier when I'm on the same day as year 10, just so that they don't interrupt you guys, which seems to have worked. But I will be around. Lockra and I will email you back in just a second. Otherwise, have a wonderful day. Don't work too massively hard. And I will see you on Friday. Sending you lots of virtual hugs, because I'm not allowed to give you physical hugs. And hopefully I get to see you soon. Bye.